Recording has begun, I think. Yes. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our Common Ground first virtual training for Common Ground 2020. This is our virtual training for conversations and facilitation. My name is Stephanie Hicks-Thompson, and I am with the Cleveland Foundation, and I get to work with this amazing crew of folks that you're going to meet today, along with many, many others, to help bring Common Ground to the community every year. As we all know, this year is unique. There's a lot happening, a lot of changes, and we're so grateful for all of you who have pivoted and kept going on along with us as we have adjusted to all of the new needs of a sort of unique pandemic world that we're living in right now. But this is going to be a brief video to help share some best practices on shaping your Common Ground conversation and thinking through facilitating conversation in the virtual space. This setup is a little different this year for our virtual setup because we will be offering several of these training videos. This one is training number 1. It is specifically conversation and facilitation. This will be followed by a couple of more videos. The next one will be training number 2, which will be about taking action with our partners at Neighborhood Connections and IOB. That's going to help you prepare you as hosts for talking to your participants and other people in your community about opportunities for project funding, following your Common Ground conversation, or right now, if you have an idea that you want to take action on, there are funds available and crowdfunding platforms available to help you do that. Training number 3 will be our sort of virtual help desk, IT, and helping people walk through the needs of the virtual conversation space that we're all using. Mostly Common Ground is using Zoom, so that's going to be the tool that we are talking about, but you are welcome to use any type of virtual tool that you are comfortable with, and we'll try to respond to those sort of different needs in those conversations. There will also be another opportunity of virtual office hours for folks to get help. So please take a look at clevelandfoundation.org/common ground for a list of those opportunities to get one-on-one assistance. But let's talk today about today's conversation. We're going to break down several different pieces of the conversation and facilitation challenges, and we're going to have a good time doing it. We have a host of friends with us today, and our fearless leader, Erica Brown, who's going to help us start the way all Common Ground conversations start, which is with a check-in. So Erica and our friends, let's all say hi.
Hi, everyone. Hi, I'm Erica Brown, and I will be walking us through this today along with the help of my friends. So the first thing that we're going to do, and the way we start off conversations, and as a member of the Neighborhood Network with Neighborhood Connections, it is one of our practices at all times, and practice is just a fundamental way that we do the work that we do. And we start every gathering with a check-in. And this practice is an opportunity for everyone on your call to put their voice into the space. It primes the room for the conversation that's to come. It puts some positivity in the space. It gets people to start thinking about the conversation that's to come. And people really know that their voices will be heard, because these conversations are all about that. We want to put our voices into these rooms. Even in these virtual spaces, we still want to be heard, and we have a lot of things to share with each other and to learn from each other. All right, so with this check-in, and you can use the same check-in during your conversation, or you can choose a different question, but this is a great one and a great way to start. So our check-in question today, the way we do this is you state your name, you say the neighborhood that you live in, the neighborhood you represent, and then the question is, what is giving you strength today? And we don't have to go in any particular order, but as the person who is starting this, I will model it for everyone else participating in it. So hi, I'm Erica. I am here in Mount Pleasant in Cleveland, Ohio. And what is giving me strength today is today, my 18-year-old daughter also had her final orientation for OSU. That would be the Ohio State University. And tonight I get to see her in her prom dress, doing her speech for bridging out of the youth religious education program at our church. There you go. Giving me all the strength because she's like all grown up. And anyone else can go next.
I can go next.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Emma. I am in Cleveland Heights in the Shaker Farms East Village, I think is the technical neighborhood. Something that is giving me strength today. Every Friday, I have a socially distant outdoor movie night with my friends using a projector on my garage. So I'm always looking forward to that at the end of every week. So I'm excited for that this evening.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lila. I live in Beechwood, and something that's giving me strength today, and Emma's check-in helped me, is I am going to go to an outdoor movie night this evening in Central at 15 9th and Outhwaite. And I'm really looking forward to that, and I'm really looking forward to supporting a friend with her event.
I can go next, actually, because I'm intending to go to that same event. What a good small world. The Harriet Tubman movie will be screened, and I saw it over Christmas break with my family, and really looking forward to seeing it again. It is so powerful. Get that. It is strengthening to imagine. And also just outside my front porch are these like hydrangeas that just do their thing, you know, through thick and thin, and in all kinds of ways. That kind of thing gives me strength.
And what's your name?
Oh, and my name's, thank you. My name's Tony Vento, and I live on the near west side on a block that some developers are recently calling Ohio City. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll go next. Hi, my name is Noelle. I am in the Coventry Village neighborhood of Cleveland Heights, and so happy to be here with you guys. I would actually say seeing all these faces of people I adore and admire when it comes to facilitation is totally giving me strength. On the other side, I will also say that today would be my grandmother's birthday. So she's very much in my heart and kind of driving me today.
Happy birthday, Grandma.
Thank you.
And again, I'm Stephanie. I live in Solon, and what's giving me strength today is what Noelle said, is this group and this opportunity to get together with them. It's always a gift. So thank you all. And tonight is our family tradition of popcorn and smoothie night. So we let my 4-year-old choose the movie, and we have a family movie, and then we have popcorn and fruit smoothies for dinner, and it's easy. And so we'll be watching Frozen 2 or Frozen 2 probably. So see how that goes.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for participating, and that is a check-in. And so feel free to use the question that we used today. Also, if you look in your conversation guide, there's also other options for how you can start your conversation and what you can use to check in. One very big one is, why is being here today important to you? That's a great one to use also. So feel free to look in your conversation guide and choose a check-in that works for your group. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So next, I know we are going to, you're here, so you already are familiar with Common Ground, but I wanted to just do a quick recap, just to level set everybody, to talk really quickly about Common Ground, what it is, what it has been in the community, what it is this year, and leading us into sort of the conversation structure and all of the really interesting things that Erica's going to share, Erica and the team are going to share with us today. So this is what Common Ground often has appeared as in the past. These are convenings, people coming together, sharing deep conversations over a meal. This is Common Ground's 4th year, and as it's always been about meeting people where they are and creating opportunities that people wouldn't have had before. And this year is no different. Just this year, it's going to look a little different. Last year, we convened over 100 locations across 4 counties. We had thousands of participants, and this year will be the same. It's just looks a little different for 2020. It's going to look like this, which is great, right? We are flexible, we're all here, and it's been really amazing seeing how the community has come together to say Common Ground is really important to us. We want to convene. We can't stand next to each other and share a meal, but we can sit and be together. And I think that is Common Ground at its essence. And so I'm really excited to see how all of you are going to shape these conversations this year. But this format, our squares that we're in, are not going to deeply change much about the real meat of Common Ground, which is the conversation. Common Ground itself has the same elements, whether you're virtual or whether you're in person. Let me show you what we're going to. Thank you for bearing with me as I switch in and out. You create a welcoming environment with Common Ground. You welcome people together, and this year's theme is Count Me In, so you're counting everyone in. That still is the same. You do your check-in, as we just did, getting to know one another, making those connections, finding the commonalities. For example, Lila and Tony just found out that they're going to the same movie. We're talking socially, physically not socially distanced, right? People are coming together. And then the meat of the conversation, you know, coming together around topics that all of you are passionate about and want to connect across. And then closing and sharing, I think talking about next steps and opportunities and creating ideas together. All of these things are still at the core of Common Ground. In 2020, there's a few new elements. We don't have a single day this year. Because we wanted to eliminate, as you know, any of the barriers that might come between bringing people together and just the needs and the new challenges that a lot of people are facing. So anytime, but there will be Common Ground conversations happening between now and October 4th. So there's going to be a lot of different opportunities. Instead of it all being on one day, you can attend one that is more convenient for you, or host on a day that's more convenient for you. In addition, many hosts have already received a support stipends. So what we're seeing from the groups that have received those stipends is that people are hosting conversations and doing alongside that community projects like murals and socially distanced concerts, and people are investing in their communities. People are providing meals. It's just really been amazing to see what the community is already building, and we're excited to see what comes out of it next. And then finally, a lot of the things that have come together from Common Ground in the past through the projects and the next steps, the grants, all of those things are still in place. Our partnerships with Neighborhood Connections and IOBI are still there, and we will be sharing more about how that looks in 2020 in, as I mentioned earlier, a subsequent video. So Common Ground is here. We're very excited. And so why don't we talk a little bit about that core piece, the conversation. Ready to go?
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so hi again, everyone. So what we're going to talk about is really about, so we just did the check-in. So we are kind of modeling the flow of the conversation while we're on this webinar today. So the check-in is the first thing that you start with. The next thing that you then flow into as part of your conversation is going over the civility rules. And so these are just, you know, they're called rules, but you can smooth that out if you want to. You can say to people, these are the ways that we want to agree to be with each other today in this Zoom call. But it really is to facilitate a smoother flow in the conversation and to have people be thoughtful about how they're participating in the conversation on the day that you host your conversation. And so these are not, if you break the rules, it's going to be a problem. These are opportunities for people to learn and to work together. So these are opportunities for people to say, oh, this is something that I'm going to hold on to while I'm having this conversation. And this is going to be the thing that I go back. This is going to be my touch point. So if I feel myself going off into a different direction than what I said in my head I'm going to agree to, or what I was holding close to me, then I know I'm going to come back to that. And so we're just going to go through what these civility rules are, or these statements that people are going to agree to and agree to hold in this space that you're hosting for Common Ground. All right, so already, diverse people are coming together, especially in the virtual space. It will probably allow even more diverse participants in your conversations. So once you have all these people in this space, it is a good idea to start off with some way for people to agree to behave and agree to talk to each other and agree to be in that space at the same time. And so we have we have a really small pledge, and this is something that you can ask people to do at the beginning. If you have the capability as a host, or if one of your facilitators has the capability, and we'll talk about roles in a little bit, but if you have the capability through your technology to share your screen like Stephanie is doing today, then I would absolutely encourage you to share your screen with the Civility Pledge. Type it in the chat if you're not able to share your screen. Say it one time and then repeat it so that people know what it is. And even if everybody's not repeating it at the same time, that's fine, as long as people know that it's there. And then you can go on into the Civility Rules. So we'll start with the pledge, and so I'll just read it out loud. Here's the pledge. We are here to explore ideas. We are here to learn from others. We are here to connect, not to conflict. And so those are really important things to hold close, because it's about a conversation. It's about finding common ground. So we could be coming from two totally opposite opinions or viewpoints or directions, but the idea is that we're coming together and we're going to have a dialogue, and it's not a debate. So we want to really focus on that on the day of your conversation. And so I'm going to go through each one of them, and they're also on your screen right now. So it's great, like it says on here, share before the conversation starts, and make sure people have time to consider which one that they really want to go onto for the conversation. In years past, when we were in person, we had buttons. If you are a previous year's host and you still have buttons, like me, go ahead and put your button on. If you know the people that you're going to be with, you might be able to do like a safe porch drop off of like different buttons to people if you still have some of those, but do what fits your conversation. And so we're going to start with the very first one. So by participating in Common Ground, what we're asking is for people to participate in a forward-looking conversation with these values in mind. Number one is value all voices. So we absolutely want to make sure that there's room for the quietest person to be heard in the conversation, the person who normally wouldn't share. And now in these virtual spaces, a whole nother way to value all voices. There are some people who will show up to your conversation who might be too shy to participate on screen, but they can still participate fully in the chat. And so we want to encourage people, like, we value all voices here. So please feel free to know for sure that you can use the chat to put your voice into the space, and also know for sure that you wanting to put your voice into the space will be respected. I love your background, Stephanie. Thank you.
I figured out how to do it. I'm going to make this available so the hosts can do it too. We're going to make it work.
Excellent. See, it's all working out. The next one is listen to understand. So we want to strive to understand each other, even across different points of view. So like I said earlier, if we're looking to connect and not conflict, if we're looking to have a dialogue and not a debate, we can absolutely listen to understand. A lot of times, as one of my colleagues, Tony, says, a lot of times people are impersonating themselves listening, and they're just waiting for their turn to talk, and they're just preparing their response. This part of the pledge and one of the rules is specifically asking you, if you're normally one of those people who's like, I got an answer, this is asking you to take a pause and take a moment and say, you know what, I'm going to listen fully, be fully present for what this person is saying so that I can understand where they're coming from and understand what they're talking about. The next one on the list is speak from experience. So we build understanding by replacing generalizations with personal observations about ourselves and our own lives. So this is the opposite of, well, that person or those people. This is I can only speak from my own experience. This is what I've experienced. I'm pretty sure most adults in these spaces have heard multiple times, use I statements. And so this is the opportunity to make sure you focus on those I statements and that you talk about your personal experience and the things that have happened in your life. The other thing that that does that we have found, and it is a wonderful thing, when you speak about your own experiences, that's a whole nother opportunity to connect with other people who have had those experiences or who are curious about that experience. So a shared experience will help build trust with other people. It'll help build relationships, and it helps build the connections that we're making through these common ground conversations. The next one, respect everyone. We all want what's best for our community. And even if we disagree, we don't have to be disagreeable. And so when you think about it, you're participating in these conversations. I haven't in all these years seen one time where people show up at the conversation just because. Like, people are showing up at these conversations because they want to participate, because they want to hear something else, because they want to talk to other people, because they're very interested in the topic. So I love going in with the idea that, okay, however people show up and whatever happens in this conversation, we all want what's best. And depending on your topic, and especially in these times, people are looking to connect. People are still looking to build community. People are still looking to build and maintain relationships. And so if you go into it respecting the fact that we all want what's best, I'm gonna go with that. And then it makes it easier to follow some of the other ones, especially like listening to understand and understanding other people's experiences and valuing all voices. All of these, it's not linear where it's like, these are the only ways that you can think about this. They all go back to each other and they all build on each other. The next one is look forward. Focus on possibility, focus on how to start, focus on who can help. That is a great way to participate in a conversation. If you are thinking about what's possible, what can grow from this, how can we move forward? It is helpful to know what's happened in the past. It is not helpful to center a conversation on what's happened in the past with no opportunity to think about how you can move forward and how you can plan for the future. And so we really want to think about, how do we start to do the next thing? So a lot of times when people say, well, what's next? That's a great way to think about things. Who can help? If we're thinking about who can help, then there's no room. Like, that kind of crowds out a lot of negativity. If we're thinking about what's possible, what's next, how can we move forward, who can help us do that? That really gets you working as a team in these conversations. And as I have found, and I'm sure all these other lovely people on the screen have found, that even in these times where we meet virtually and we are in all these spaces and we don't see each other in person anymore, it is still absolutely possible to connect. It is still absolutely possible to build and maintain and advance relationships. And so we really want to focus on that. And then the very last one is question kindly. This is actually my personal favorite. This is the one that I hold all the time, the button that I wear. Question kindly. Each unknown is an opportunity to grow. If you disagree, try to learn, ask questions, and be kind. So this isn't one of those be nice and smile moments. This is about being kind. You might not like it. You might totally disagree with the person, but it's also an opportunity to learn. And if you show up to a common ground conversation not open to learning, well, I don't even know how that happens. So I'm gonna go with the positive. I'm gonna look forward and say, people are showing up to these conversations because they want to learn something new. There's something that they can get from it. There's something that they can give to the conversation and the dialogue. But when you don't know something, instead of going immediately to, wow, why are you like that? Or what makes you say that? You can question kindly. You're still asking the question. You still want to know what the person's motivation is, but you can really turn to, as my colleague says, turn to wonder. I wonder why this person feels this way. I wonder what this person's experience is that has led them to have this idea about the way things are. I wonder what else has happened. I wonder how we can continue this conversation in a way where maybe we can meet somewhere in the middle. And so you're still asking questions, you're still getting to what you really want to know, but you're not questioning it like all by yourself. Like, well, why'd you say that? Like, that's not a way to spark conversation. That's a way to spark conflict. And so we're looking to connect here. Question kindly. You can still get your questions answered, but you might learn something brand new. There might be a whole experience. And if that person is speaking from their experience, there might be a whole set of experiences that other person has had that you don't know anything about yet. Now you've learned something about someone else's experiences, and you've also become a better question asker. So there you go. And you have an opportunity to connect and continue the conversation afterwards. All right, so those are the civility rules. Thank you, Stephanie, for sharing your screen with that. And then we'll just go ahead into the theme. And if you'd like to talk about the purpose of the theme, Stephanie, and then I will go into the other parts.
Yes, absolutely. So, so this year, as we were considering what Common Ground 2020 could be, and this was, you know, obviously this has been in planning since last year. So we knew that 2020 was going to be a pivotal year. And I think none of us could have anticipated, but it's still, it still remains the same. Big things are happening this year. The census is happening. And I think that there has been a lot of information out there in the community about it, but maybe not as much as there needs to be. And we really wanted to underscore how important it is that every single member of our community is counted. But when we're having those conversations about being counted, it brought up all of these different ideas and feelings and opportunities, because it's so weighted, this idea of who is counted, who isn't counted, why aren't they, who feels that they can say, you know, count me in. And that became our theme for the year, this idea of asking the community to consider what it means when you say, like, I want to be counted, I demand to be counted, and sort of asking others in the community to recognize that in each other. So it's explicitly about all of us coming together and being recognized in the community. It's about the census, it's about the election, it can be about anything. There's lots of opportunity. And we left it open in that way on purpose. However, we also have come into a lot of new challenges this year. And so as we were going through the theme, we realized that people may also want to address a lot of the not new issues, but some of the issues that it started coming around as soon as COVID-19 happened, after the murder of George Floyd, and really important conversations about systemic racism and social justice started to bubble to the top and feel very, very urgent for many, many people in our community in ways that they always have been, but it was a lot more immediate following the protests and the different, what's the word I'm looking for? Movements that sort of coalesced around all of that. So all of a sudden here we have a theme that can be broadly sort of seen across all of those elements. And we really, again, wanted to make the opportunity available for people to interpret that how they would like. So in the conversation guide this year, we have included general language about how to have a conversation around the Count Me In theme, but we've also included very specific examples for those who want to have conversations focusing on the census and what it means to be counted, especially who isn't being counted in our community and why, and what we as a community can do to come together to make sure that they are counted. And then also different conversation topics that are focused on the impact and the sort of reactions and what needs to be done in the community to help our community get through the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic and social, emotional, mental impacts that the pandemic has had on our communities. There are so many rich conversations that need to be had at this time. I think we want this structure to be as flexible as possible. So the theme this year is Count Me In. It can be, you can count yourself into any of these topics. Obviously, as always, Common Ground is flexible to those. So.
Thank you. And so when we're thinking about the topics that people will be using for your conversations, so there's this idea that you can have a census conversation that's strictly about Count Me In, but Count Me In can be done broadly. There's also this idea that you can have a COVID-19 conversation, this idea that you can have social justice conversations. But one of the things that remains constant and consistent, even if no matter what your conversation topic is or the way you want to shape your questions, is that even though we're meeting in these virtual spaces, we are still responsible for each other. We are a community, and we are attempting to build community. We're attempting to maintain community and maintain relationships and form new relationships. And so one of the practices that we've adopted and that you can also use in your conversation is about being a responsible community member and about responsible community building. Before you like dive into your conversations, you can choose where you place it, but I just want to make sure that you have the information. And so there are guidelines that we use that are like best practices and best ways to behave as a responsible community member. And so you can talk about guidelines, and these are really based on the recommendations that have come down from the health experts at this time. And especially because in Ohio, there's been increases in case numbers, and what was before a suggestion or highly recommended is now a mask wearing mandate when out in public, specifically in Cuyahoga County and Lorain County. And so quite a few of you will be doing conversations in Cuyahoga and Lorain County. And so one of the ways that you can be responsible as a host and as facilitators is to make sure you mention that to people in your conversation. And although you're doing your part by meeting virtually and not meeting in person, it is also important to remember that people are still living their lives and we don't know each person's situation. So just a small reminder so that we continue to be responsible community members and help other people, especially just know that we're thinking about that and thinking about them as hosts and facilitators. So some of the best practices, and I will actually send this to Stephanie so it can come out when you guys get your backgrounds and your civility rules that you can post. Still best to limit in-person interaction. So that's something that you want to make sure that you say. And if possible, stay 6 feet away from other people who don't live inside of your home. Wash your hands frequently for at least 20 seconds. If you give or receive anything, wash your hands and sanitize your items before and after. You can talk about the recommendations depending on what county you're in Ohio, where you're hosting your conversation. But it is now recommended that everyone wear a face mask when in public to help prevent the spread of COVID-19. And then also mention, like I said, that it is actually a mandate in Cuyahoga County and Lorain County. And depending on where you have your conversation and when you have your conversation, you don't know where people are coming from, so it could affect them. But also, that list could change at any time. So just be aware of that. Like, do a quick Google search before your conversation starts, just so that you have the most up-to-date information at the time.
Yeah.
All right.
Bring in on this a little bit. I know, sorry to interrupt, Erica, but just like a little background for those, it was really hard to make the decision to request that all Common Ground conversations be virtual this year. But in the end, it felt like what we needed to do, because like Erica just said yesterday, the day before we filmed this webinar, you're going to be watching it, a week from now or 2 weeks from now. Things are changing so rapidly. We knew that we wouldn't be able to respond in the way that hosts and your guests would need us to, with the way things are changing so rapidly. And so it just felt safer. We are cognizant of the fact that not everybody has access to the virtual tools that we are using for this. And so that's why, as I mentioned earlier, we wanted to make it available. So while we're using the Zoom platform, if you want to use, Facebook Messenger or something that's more accessible, usable by your phone or through some other process, we're very open to that. But unfortunately, we can't support in person. If you are hosting an in-person, please social distance, wear your mask, do all of those things that Erica just shared, and we please stay safe. That's the most important thing for us this year.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to get into your roles, and we're just going to go through that briefly. It is in your conversation guide. Most people watching this webinar have already done this part, and you've done it really well over the past few years. But there are also some new people who need to be caught up and need to know exactly how the roles play out, especially with the changes and being in virtual spaces. They're just, most of the roles are still the same. It's just that there are some tweaks to them because we're in virtual spaces. So when you think about what your role is in this Common Ground event, you can be a host. So you're the person who planned your conversation. You're the person who came up with your topic, the person who came up with the questions. You are a passionate community member. You want to take action. You want to bring people together for a conversation that matters to you and matters in your community. You are taking time out of quite a few days, since it's not just one day and you've got to do some planning. You've taken all this time out so that you can have the best possible conversation. You are looking to connect people to each other. You are trying to engage members of your community this year. That is awesome and amazing. If you are new to Zoom and you are still taking on this host role, like, let's give you that right there, right? Just start off. So that's the host role, and you have materials that you need. You'll have the materials that you need to do that. If there's anything else that you need, just contact us and you'll have an opportunity to take care of that. Facilitators. So for my host, if you know and anticipate, like if you have a closed group and you have invitation only group, you know that you can pretty much manage the Zoom call or manage whatever platform you're on in these spaces by yourself, then that's great. But if you think you need assistance, and you probably do, this is where facilitators come in. And facilitators during the in-person gatherings were really people who would be at each table and they keep the conversation going, they keep people on track. They still serve that role right now, but there are also so many other roles for facilitators. As a host, you want to be present in the space. You want to be able to like see who all showed up. You want to, wave at people on the screen, send them chat messages, and welcome them into the space. Tell them to bring their snacks if they want to, so you still have this idea of having a meal together, because I bring snacks all the time. But your facilitators there'll need to be somebody who checks the chat for you. If you have a super active chat, then as host, you won't have an opportunity to really stay on top of that. And facilitators can check that chat for you and make sure that those questions or those people's comments are lifted up, or statements or anything that's happening in there gets lifted up during the conversation. That also works because one of the things that'll come up when we do the technical video, but I'm going to mention it here super quick. Anyone who comes in after you posted something in chat can't see it. So to have a chat facilitator will help people copy paste and keep it moving so that everyone still sees the same information in your conversation. Another thing that facilitators can do is you as the host will have the ability to, to start your conversation with everyone muted. You'll have your opportunity to be able to call on people, but your facilitator can also watch the room for you. Once you get past 25 people on a screen, now you've got extra screens. And depending on what functions you're using or what platform you're using, so in Zoom, once you get past that, they're off the screen. And some of the other platforms, once you get past 4 people, they're off the screen. Sometimes you can only see who's speaking at any given time. And a facilitator can help you keep track of who your participants are, who might need to be muted because there's background noise, or anything else is happening. They might be able to take someone else into a private chat or into another breakout space who's having difficulty in the conversation. So just know that using facilitators is a great idea, even on a Zoom call, even if we feel like we're experts and like, I got this, there's only 10 people coming, I'm fine. We would still suggest that you have a facilitator to help you with that, because these are the people who are going to make sure that all the voices are heard. These are people who are going to help you guide the conversation. These are also the people as a facilitator. So let's just be very honest with hosts. This is like a total host secret. As the host, you get to be the great, good person who is hosting this awesome conversation and bringing people together. Your facilitators get to be the people that say, no, we're not doing it that way, but let's put a pin in that and come back to it. Let your facilitators be those people. People who volunteer to be facilitators are used to being in that role. You still get to be the great, good host who is just being gracious and telling people they can snack and providing great backgrounds and talking about the fun stuff, and your facilitators get to do that other part. Go ahead.
We've got some people with extensive facilitator training in this group here. Any sort of tips and tricks for that role? Things that anyone on this group wants to throw out there for somebody considering how to be a facilitator, how to jump into these, maybe especially in the virtual space. I'm gonna put you on the spot.
What have you learned?
What do you know? How much time do we have?
I'd add one piece in here, especially in this time of being on online platforms. I think it highlights attention of preparation for the technical sides of things. And of course, that's super important, understanding how to do all the technical pieces. I think what might be easy to forget is the kind of interior preparation that facilitators are wise to do, because the way facilitators show up actually unconsciously and instantaneously within 4 milliseconds actually communicates itself and is infectious to those who do show up. So whatever's, as Miles Davis says, if it ain't in your heart, it ain't in your horn. I say it's both better and worse than that. Whatever's in your heart is going to show up unconsciously in the horns of everyone around you. So as facilitators, it's really important to take whatever it is. Each of us have our own ways of kind of preparing our own inner life to be able to bring out our best self and to be present and attentive and responsive and encourage all those civility rules. Those civility rules pieces, doing what you can to bring those out from the inside for you. It may sound, I don't know, unnecessary, but I've seen time and time again that that's really key to be able to create these kinds of conversations. That would be my single biggest piece, but there are other technical sides. Go ahead, others.
I would add into that, if you're facilitating and you have a host, so these are separate roles, have a little planning time so that there's truly agreement about the bottom line goal. Because some of the most beautiful conversations go way off course, but if you and the host know what the goal is, you can let them meander more. You can let them have a different kind of process, as long as you both know what the bottom line goal of your day is. And it may be having as many people speak as possible, or it may be coming up with a question that leads to next action. Those are very different kinds of conversations. So I would not skip at least having a conversation with your facilitators so you're all on the same page about what is most important about your day. And one thing I would say is using those civility rules, it was the one reason we came up with them, right? Is it depersonalizes that work. So it's not you are doing something wrong, or I'm catching you doing something. We all had an agreement here, let me remind you, and it creates a common commitment versus calling people out. So I would feel really comfortable figuring out which of those civility rules can I bring into this moment, versus you feeling like you as facilitator have to make something get fixed.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. The one last thing that I'll just add in facilitating these spaces is when you're on a Zoom call, Messenger call, Google Hangout, Google Meet, there's so many of them now, Office Teams, like whatever you're on, whatever your platform, if you are on a good old fashioned landline on a conference call, if there are still landlines, if you are on a conference call, because that's the platform that you are choosing for the group that you are meeting with, have fun. Like have a little, even the most serious conversation, you gotta allow yourself a moment because anything can happen. It's a phone call, it's on a video screen. Your cat might suddenly jump up on the desk in front of the video and you don't have any control over that. It's okay to laugh at yourself. It's okay to pause and start over, especially in a Zoom call. You might be all business up top and have like your party clothes on the bottom, but have a little fun with it. Like if you wanna make sure you stay super serious during the conversation, then put on fun flip-flops, but have a little piece of fun so that there's still something there for you to be like, okay, I'm not taking myself so seriously as a facilitator, so that after the conversation, it's not like, what did I, ticking off what did I do wrong? What could I have done better? It's really ticking off like, what came out of this that was amazing? What are our next steps? So still being forward-looking, you still allow yourself as facilitators and hosts to be forward-looking, and it's not just about your participants being those people. Right. All right, anything else for facilitators?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Especially here, everybody thinks that if someone isn't talking, you're failing. So it's easier to be with people and be quiet for a minute and reflect. But I would highly recommend getting comfortable with the pause, getting comfortable with the quiet, and not feeling like when you ask for a first person to go, giving it time for that person to manifest. Because on screen, man, people get so impatient. So that's one thing I'd say.
It's totally true. And we had that conversation even before we started this conversation, before we started recording. We said, well, what if, my kid comes, what if there's background noise? Like, it's fine. It's fine. It doesn't matter which role you are. If you're the host or you're the facilitator, if you're the participant, we're all living our lives at the same time that we're doing this. And this is about showing who we are. And so if I have my 7-month-old who's going to come and sit on my lap during my common ground conversation, then that's what we're going to do. And it's great. Or if you're a cat or your 16-year-old or your your 42-year-old husband or whomever. That's part of who we are. So let it fly. This is what it is.
Yeah. And that also builds the connections. A lot of times in person, we show up as who we want people to see us as, and not necessarily who we really are. But if we're sitting at home and the whole world is happening around us in our house, like people are going to see like, oh, you have a cat too. We might not have ever talked about that in person. Or, oh, your kids walk through your background too. Awesome. Or your husband puts meal on your desk and food for you to eat that you can't eat on screen all the time too. Awesome. So remember that that's another point of connection. And you can even, it's okay to bring it up. Like there's no, you can only have your conversation this way. The way that the conversation is flowing at the time with the people who are in that space with you, let it flow that way. Because you can always come back to your questions. Like Noelle said, I thought that was awesome. Know what your bottom line is. Like, what's the main thing that you're looking to get out of this? Let's be in agreement on that. And then we know that we're always going to bring the conversation back to that no matter what else happens. All right. Favorite role for me, participant. The people who are showing up for your conversation, the people that you are encouraging to bring snacks to the conversation, the people that you are encouraging to participate in all parts of this conversation. These people are like awesome. Like they are showing up in virtual spaces to have conversations potentially with strangers on purpose about conversation topics that are super important to them. And now other people know that that's important to them. A disagreement could happen and they don't know. They have no idea what's going to happen in this conversation or exactly how it's going to go, but they are being brave enough to show up and participate and like fully get into this. So be sure, like one of the things I can say for facilitators and hosts, part of your role also, thank your participants. Thank them at the beginning, thank them somewhere in the middle during the conversation, or if you take a little break, thank them at the end, because they are what makes this happen. Like we could be a lot of facilitators and hosts sitting in a room together, and I've been in those rooms before, and that's not nearly as fun as when there are actual participants. like we're participants here too. Like even on a webinar, we are facilitators, hosts, participants, because people have had those different roles over the years. So remember that your participants are showing up and they are agreeing to things with you, and they are really trying to focus on how does this conversation lead me to finding common ground with other people. All right, we can move on to the next part now. Did you want to put up your next share as we walk through?
So all of this next page is it's sort of a worksheet that you can find in your conversation guide. And you can use this to sort of sketch out and build your conversation. If you don't know where to find the conversation guide, you can download it on the Cleveland Foundation website on the Common Ground page. So it's just clevelandfoundation.org/common ground. And there's a link to where you can download this guide where there's a lot of really in-depth outlining of all of these things, the worksheets, and some of the tips we're going to share later can all be found there. I guess I should have started with that, huh?
All right, so when you come into these conversations, so this is just a sample agenda, so it gives you an opportunity to have something to have some sort of structure. We are very fond of saying in the Neighborhood Network, like we don't set the agenda, but we definitely have a structure. You need a structure for your conversation just because you want to be sure, and going back again to what Noelle said, that there's some agreement and some conversation between you and any facilitators ahead of time about what your ultimate goal is, like the ultimate purpose of this conversation for you, what your intentions are with this conversation. And then that can frame how you set up the agenda, but this is just a structure. This is just a template that you can use. You can say, well, I'm not going to do this part, or it's not going to last this long, or I really would rather have 60 minutes of conversation and only this amount of time for check-ins and introductions. That's all up to you to actually plan out the agenda the way you want it to be for your particular conversation. But the structure will help you really think about just the pieces of the conversation. So there's the welcoming and the introductions and making sure that you count everyone in. There's the check-ins, or as people call them in a lot of other circles, icebreakers. And then you have the opportunity to just ask people, like, you're taking the temperature of the room, you're finding out where people are, just like we did at the beginning of this conversation. The actual conversation itself is your open discussion time. What the tradition is for Common Ground conversations is to have 3 rounds of conversation. And so you can plan your time around having 3 rounds of conversation, and I'll dive into that as soon as I go through this agenda. But when you have these 3 rounds of conversation, you can give each one a certain amount of time. You can decide that you'll let it flow until it doesn't flow anymore, but that's a discussion and a conversation and a plan that you agree on with your facilitators in that conversation. The next part of it, which is really important, is once you have all these conversations, if you do 3 rounds of conversation around whatever topic it is, it's going to be a lot of time with people talking to each other and figuring things out. So the reflection time is really important. If there's anything that you're going to condense or make smaller so that you can make room for other things, I would absolutely suggest that you keep this reflection time and make it, you know, if it takes 10 to 20 minutes, like at least a solid 15, for people to have an opportunity to talk about what came out that was meaningful for them, to give people an opportunity to talk about what they're taking away from it. So it gives them a time to pause and say, like, I've been talking for, 45 minutes or an hour, or I've been listening for 45 minutes or an hour, engaging in these conversations. Oh, what stood out for me? What do I want to leave here with? What is really sitting with me today as I end this conversation? How am I inspired to think and act differently as a result of this conversation? That's very powerful. That gives people an opportunity to really hold on to what happened in that conversation and have it make sense for them. This is where they get the meaning out of what happened. So people can participate in conversations all the time, and then you can ask them a question about it, an hour later, and they're like, I don't know what happened there. But this is an opportunity for it to really stick with people. So you have an opportunity to reflect, you have an opportunity to learn. And so you want to be sure you hold time for that. And then the last part would be about what's next. These are forward-facing conversations, forward-thinking, forward-looking conversations. Remember, we were talking about what's possible. What can we do next? Who can we get to help? And so what's next for you? Is this a conversation where, now that we've reflected on it, what we're taking from it is this was a great conversation and this is where it ends? That's awesome, because you had that conversation, and showing up and having a conversation is a big deal. So be very aware of that also. But also your next move or your what's next might also be, we had this great conversation and I love getting to know you on this screen. Now I want to meet you on another screen, just the 2 of us. Continued connections between the people who showed up at that conversation. There might be a group of 4 who were like, oh my goodness, I heard this person say that, or like I responded to you in the chat box. I have made more connections by doing like a private thing in the chat box to respond to somebody like, oh, and then ended up doing something else with them, having another conversation and continuing that connection. We might want to connect with, as a participant, I might want to connect with the host again. Like, you put this together and I would love to learn more about it. I might want to connect with a facilitator, like, so by the by, I'm doing something next week on Zoom and I can use a facilitator. So it could be a very self-serving connection, or it could be like serving the greater good connection. So that's up to you how you do this and continue it. And then the other thing that could happen that's what's next is that you're going to take an action. So you might be having this very in-depth conversation. You might think, well, we're only talking about the census and we're talking about how people count in my neighborhood and we're having this great conversation and I think it's over. But there might be a group of people who are like, hey, there are still people who aren't being counted. How do we fix this? Like, how do we go out here and get like people aware of what needs to happen with the census, how much time it actually takes? Do they need help filling it out? What are their fears? What are their questions? How do I educate myself on the census so that I can be a better neighbor to other people? How do I educate myself on social justice issues so that I can be a better citizen? How do I educate myself on COVID-19 more? How do I reach out to other people? Can I help with the personal protective equipment? So anything could come out of that. And those are the things that, those are the things where you hear people are like, oh, and now there's grant money and now there's crowdfunding platforms for this. So those are opportunities to step and do that next thing. But also know that taking action really could be making those connections. So don't discount any of that. Like, there are levels to it, but every level has its own like set of things that you can actually do and put into action after you finish these conversations. And honestly, like I said, that reflection period is super important, because that's the time where that's going to start to come together for people like, oh, I could do another thing, or I could take this other step, or I could meet this other person and find out something else. I could ask one more question before we leave today. And so just be aware of that. And so that's how you would create your agenda. We provide the structure, timeline, this is a suggestion. You actually put it together the way that you want to put it together for your conversation. All right. Did anyone else want to contribute anything to that?
talkative Noelle. That's one little thing.
Come on.
When you're doing the conversation piece and the 3 questions, one of the things to think about, in person, you have extroverts and introverts, and they maybe behave very differently in technology and a virtual space than they do in person. One of the things that we did early on was have people write an answer before they discussed it, so that you don't lose track of your own personal answer being led by an extrovert whose idea everyone like cheers. So I think even looking in either using chat or doing it privately, but thinking about creating that pause, that moment of reflection to hear your own voice before you bring your voice to conversation can be really powerful. And if you do it in chat, it's not something that someone has to read everything out, but imagine the little flow that happens of all these ideas and feedback that then feed the conversation that happens. So as a facilitator and as a host, you decide what process you use, but I encourage you to think, just because it's conversation doesn't mean that moments to write might not help really inform that conversation, particularly for your introverts. And I like to say for extroverts too, because we say, otherwise we talk our way to an answer and it takes up everyone's time. So sometimes getting us to write first is actually beneficial to everybody.
I'd love to piggyback on that, exactly. As I am fond of saying, using a pause to tell people like, all right, we're going to take 30 seconds in silence to just notice your first response to that question and trust your first response, but make note of it, like Noelle just said, right? So that if and when the conversation goes another way, you still know what you might contribute. And as I love to also say, right, machines, and you can say this, hosts and facilitators, people, machines, when we press pause, stop. But humans, when we press pause, get creative. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds to get creative and notice what's in your response. And then you'll have a place of confidence to come into this conversation. So that's one piece. You might also consider sending the questions ahead of time to people. Some people like to have that, and you can acknowledge that it's not homework to be done in advance, but that some people like to have it in advance. You know who you are, and how you show up is the best way for you to show up.
Awesome, thank you. Anyone else want to contribute to that part? Awesome, so we can go ahead. So this is the point where we're just gonna walk through very quickly, just talking about like how the 3 rounds of conversation can show up. So people are gonna have different topics. You're gonna have different ways that you wanna ask these questions. Like you're gonna have an idea of how you want, like what direction do I want this conversation to go in? And you also have an idea of what are the questions that I actually want to have answered during this time? Like, what is it about, like, what made me step up to be a host in the first place? Is like, because this thing is in my head and I think this is so important, and these are the questions I want to ask. But we're looking at one of the ways that you can frame your rounds of questions, since we're not, last year, if you were a host last year, there were 3 questions about the past, the present, and the future that automatically lend themselves to 3 rounds of conversation. This year, it's not so like cut and dried and clear. So you have an opportunity to be very creative with that. You have an opportunity to figure out ways to build 3 rounds of conversation, because that's so useful. You might shorten some, make some bigger or longer, but here's the sample conversation topics. And so we're going to use the census conversation as an example of how you can do this. So I'm going to use the 3rd question in your conversation guide, COVID-19 impact on census. So that could be your sample conversation topic. And then that covers like actually all 3 topics. That covers the census and count me in, that covers COVID-19, and it could also cover social justice, depending on how you frame your actual questions. And so a sample question that could fall under COVID-19 impact on the census is, how can we help others be counted? What factors could prevent someone from being counted? And what was your experience completing the census? But, so you see how they're listed on here? What we're gonna do is actually flip those, because what you want to do in a conversation is start with the personal. So that helps people get into the conversation. That goes back to the Civility Rules, speaking from experience. That's a way to have everyone be able to put their voice in the room. So that goes back to your check-in and your intention with that. that lets people know that what they have to say matters and what's happening with them personally also matters. But everything starts with you as a person and as an individual. And so we're going to start with the personal conversation. So it might be along the lines of, what was your experience completing the census? So you might have some people in your conversation who are like, oh, this is, I just did. So like for me, I did it online. Took me a few minutes. Some people filled out the paper application for the census. Some people called in because they had questions. Some people haven't completed it yet. Some people are waiting for someone to come around to ask them the questions. It just depends on where every person is and what they have access to and what their personal experience is. So those questions are going to get answered. You're going to get a lot of different answers for that about how it affects people personally. So we start with the personal. The next level is that we move to community. And so we talk about how can we help others be counted. So this is also one of those things that may come up like while people are thinking about it, like, oh, not only is it about like my experience with the census, but now this next round of conversation, I need to think about other people too. So I'm thinking about the community outside of just myself. So it might be my street, it might be my neighborhood, I might be thinking about my whole city, I might be thinking about a population I'm not a part of because I know that there needs to be help with everyone getting counted. Like I've read on the news or I heard somewhere that there are hard to count populations. How can I be a part of making sure other people get counted? And that's how you can personally impact the community around you. And then the third level is really thinking bigger picture. So the third round of questions could be about like a systems level thing. So that could be like, what factors could prevent someone from being counted? And this is where like all the things come into play. So are people not being counted because at a systemic level, depending on where they live, what they have access to, technology they have access to. Is this a population that feels like afraid of these type of like conversations and questionnaires, and they don't trust what's going to be done with that information, or they're worried about certain things about that information, or their living situation is such that they're thinking like, I don't want to participate in this. Also on a systems level about what factors could prevent someone from being counted, is it that people don't have enough education around what the census numbers are actually used for? So that's one of those things where it's like, well, why don't people know what happens with the census numbers? What do people have access to that prevents them from knowing what census numbers are for? Is this a literacy issue? Is it like access isn't just about technology or whether or not you get your mail at a certain address? Access could also be about, I have the papers in front of me, but nobody in my home can like go through these papers and know what's exactly on them so that I know exactly what I'm answering on these pieces of paper. So that's a systems level question. So that's a great way, like if you're looking for a way to form your 3 rounds of conversation, start with the personal, move that next level up to community, and then finally move up to the system level. All right, is there anyone else who'd like to contribute to that? All right, so those are some ways to run into those rounds of conversation. You already have like the agenda template, the suggestions for how to structure your time. And this will get you through the conversation. So those are the parts that you really wanted to know about getting you through the conversation. And now we can move on to the next thing. And so we talked about your roles. We talked about what happens during your conversation. We talked about what can happen after your conversation. And that will be another training to talk about everything that can happen after your conversation. One of the other things that we can talk about though is just really briefly think about things that could be challenges, because that has come up every single year about what could be challenges to hosting, what could be challenges to facilitation, and we do want to address that. This is also an opportunity where if you want to talk to somebody personally, like our information will be out there, my information will be out there. We have gone over these questions so many times. I know Tony and I last year, like we wrote them all down. We had them on giant chart paper. So we are absolutely okay with answering all these questions. So if you would like to share, so we can go through those facilitation challenges. Thank you. Uh-oh, I can't hear you.
I'm muted.
Hi.
Everybody just needs to, we all have to get used to continually asking everybody to unmute.
Yes.
If you only ask one person per meeting and tell them that they are muted, then it's a good meeting.
That's a good, yeah, that's a great meeting.
You only have to do it once. Okay, tips for quality conversations.
Thank you. And so here are some things that come up. They came up in the in-person conversations. They're going to come up in virtual conversations. So what if a smaller group shows up? What if you were really ready for like 25 people to be on this Zoom screen and 4 or 5 show up? That's okay. It's still a conversation. You can have a conversation. I have had plenty of conversations with myself. So you can have a conversation with 2 people. You can have a conversation with 4 people. You can have a conversation with 20 people. So don't let that be like the determining factor on whether or not your conversation should go forward or whether or not it's a success. If you get 2 people in the room, if it's just you and 1 other person, you have a conversation. You can still walk through the civility rules. You can still talk about how you're going to be in that conversation together. And then if it's a smaller group, honestly, you have more time to do other things too. So you can make your conversation pieces longer. You can make different segments longer. You can have a discussion with the group. Like, okay, well, I had this agenda and I had it planned out this way, but now that we're a smaller group, maybe we can all build this together. So there are so many opportunities with a smaller group. So that's okay if a smaller group shows up. If a larger group shows up, have some facilitators in your back pocket so that they can break off with that larger group, pieces of that larger group.
Hey, Erica, do you have a recommendation around size and when to be concerned about the size of an audience for people?
So in Zoom specifically, we have found, and Tony can speak to this too, we have found that once you go off the screen, you need more than 2 people. So like if you have the host and a facilitator and you've got, that means 23 other people can be in there because you can see them all at the same time and keep track of them. And then you can have your participants list up and it's easier to keep track of chat. Once you go past that amount, then you need to start adding people on, like literally at 24 people, you need an extra facilitator besides just 1 facilitator and the host, because then you need to be able to keep track of the chat. If you are doing breakout rooms, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and that'll come up in the technical training. If people are doing breakout rooms, like 10 people in a breakout room, if you have the ability to keep it less than that, like that's great. We even do a check-in during one of the things that Tony and I do, where we have like 3 people in a breakout room by themselves. That gives everybody a lot of time to talk. It gives everybody an opportunity to get to know something like more personal, it's more intimate. If you have the facilitation skills and the facilitation capacity, like if you have enough facilitators with you, and they don't have to be, let's be clear, they don't have to be trained facilitators, just people that you've had a conversation with who have agreed to do this, who understand what it is that you're looking for from this conversation and can do the role that you're asking to do. If you're saying, I need you to be my chat facilitator, okay, I know I can monitor the chat and make sure I lift up those voices. I can make sure that someone has my phone number so that they don't have access to the chat. If they're calling in from a house phone, they can call me and ask a question. So just make that available to people. But yeah, once you get past a certain number, it is absolutely the best idea to have more facilitators. And you want to keep your most skilled facilitators or your most experienced facilitators for the bigger rooms. And then you can also, so it's a lot easier. Like if I'm not, I don't know, I'm not really a professional facilitator. I don't know if I want to facilitate this conversation. You can keep a conversation on track in a smaller space. So then you don't have to have as much, like people are like, well, what if I don't know any facilitators? You absolutely do know. Ask someone to help you. The people who volunteer to help you are perfect facilitators.
I'd like to add one piece about size. If a small group shows up, sometimes I've been tempted to think like, oh my gosh, I guess this isn't a worthwhile topic or it doesn't matter. Actually, it's a really powerful experience I've noticed to trust that like, wait, I am really drawn to this topic. This is important, at least to me. And if even just one other person shows up, you know that that's an important topic for the 2 of you. And there's something there that wants to live, even if it's just between the 2 of you. And trusting that topic to spend time with, again, as Erica pointed out, flexibility perhaps you have more, but trusting that the topic itself is something that wants to be engaged by those who are there, and to honor that even when we're tempted to think, oh, low numbers means it's not important. No, no, no. Low numbers means it's just going to be different, the way that you get to attend uniquely to what's important that wants to emerge because of who has shown up in the room. Trusting those who've shown up.
Yeah.
We like to say at the City Club, because we do forums and events every week, that the people who are intended to be there are there.
Exactly.
So really, it's about not about the number, it's about the intention.
Exactly.
Yes. Thank you. And so the next one is really just about like, how can you make each breakout room, make sure each breakout room is diverse. So a lot of times at in-person gatherings, it's hard to make sure that your tables are diverse because people show up with people they know and they want to gravitate towards that. Well, in these online and virtual platforms, as the host and as facilitators with like co-hosting abilities or however you set up your platform, you have the ability to create rooms the way that you want to. And that's okay. And you just let people know that I'm going to create the rooms. Like, it's great if somebody wants to only be in a room with people who look like them or sound like them, or they know for sure have the same type of ideas in their heads as them. But you as the host get to choose how people peel off. And so that'll be another part of the technical training. But just know, you can control who goes into the breakout rooms because you can assign them yourself. What if people want to talk about something other than the conversation topic? So this is a facilitation piece. So this is one of those things where if people want to talk about something other than the conversation topic, you know, a lot of us have been to different meetings where there's like a parking lot. This is an opportunity to suggest that people use the chat. And that's fine to say, if there's something else that you want to talk about, you can write it down for yourself. You can put it in the chat, and then we can see if we have time to get to that. Because what we're doing, and this is again, like Noelle said, why you want to have that conversation as hosts and facilitators together to be sure you're on the same track. If the ultimate goal is, you know, to get from A to Q, and this person is all the way on Z, then, you know, you need to keep that conversation going from A to Q, and you can ask them to hold that until later. And a lot of times in these virtual spaces, you don't feel nearly as uncomfortable if you're not used to being able to do that, or not used to asking people to hold off on a part of a conversation, or if you feel like that's confrontational, if people want to do something different than what's happening. In a Zoom space, you have so many more tools. And in a virtual space, you have so many more tools to be able to ask people to do that and to be able to ask people to hold on to those thoughts. If people aren't engaging in the conversation, so this is again, so this could be someone, like you said earlier, who's an introvert, who just hasn't figured out, like they're standing there waiting for their moment to jump in, but the very talkative people have taken over the conversation. This is an opportunity where facilitators and hosts can ask people, you know, I want to put it out there that we want to make sure that we, phrase that we are fond of is share the air. We want to make sure people share the air. Put it in the chat. You can leave it in the chat, put it in the chat over and over again if you need to, if you see that happening. Say it out loud. It is okay to say, well, if there's anyone else who'd like to share, and get people to participate that way. Some people show up because they can, and they just want to listen sometimes. So we don't know, we don't have any way of gauging whether or not people are not participating because they don't feel they can, or not participating just because I'm just here to observe. Especially in these online platforms, you'll see people who keep their screens completely dark and stay on mute the whole time. A good check-in with people is just to say, we won't, so one of the practices that we do is we say, we won't take you off mute or ask you to share your video screen if that's not what you want to do. But if you are actually having technical difficulties, that's when you use another phone where people can call in, another number, another way for people to contact you in case they're having those difficulties. Sometimes people are okay not participating in the conversation, and that's okay. You've extended the invitation. You've made sure that they know that they can, and you're using the tools that you have to make sure everyone knows that their voice is important and they can put it into the space. And that's really all you can do, because it's up to the other person to decide how and when they participate. Lacking a sense of interest or excitement from the group. Again, don't mistake silence for lack of interest or excitement. Sometimes people just need to think for a moment, or sometimes people are okay with being quiet and waiting for somebody else to talk. It's okay. You don't have to fill all the space. And here's the other thing, like what Tony said, if they show up, that's important to them. They're interested. They might not be as excited. That might be like a judgment call on your part, where you're just like, they're not nearly as excited as I want them to be. But that's okay. They showed up. That means that they're totally interested and that there's something there for each person who showed up. On a Zoom screen, you know, you're staring at each other's faces constantly. We don't have extra body language. We don't see if people are enthusiastically eating. Like, we don't know what else is happening. So you also don't know, maybe the person like is on mute and there's like a whole other thing going on in the room. We don't know. Don't take that personally. It's okay if there's a lack of excitement or if it doesn't seem like people are interested. They showed up and they're staying and they're participating the way that they can. that shows that they're interested.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
I would just say, I get caught by that one all the time. I'm always worried about, is this conversation entertaining enough? And what I've learned over time is to focus on the people who are engaged. Don't be driven by those who, to your point, might have very good reason to be in the space where they are, and show up for the people who do want to move that conversation forward.
Yes. Number 6 is a lot like what if people want to talk about something else? Go ahead.
May I, just adding on that, if it does really seem like there's a real dead space, I mean, number one, you can ask to, to check your pulse about that, right? But if there really has come to a point where it seems like there's an impasse, or this is lead us to the next ones, or if there's a really low engagement, coming back to the purpose question, why was this important for you to be here? Why is this question important to you? Right? Getting people implicitly and explicitly back in touch with their reason and their purpose, and even courageously asking not just why it was important to be here, but why is being here perhaps connected to the larger things that are important to you, right? So the more you get people reconnected with purpose, the better. So if you haven't used that as one of your check-in options in the very beginning, remember we talked about that as an option in the beginning, you can bring it out there. Or if you have talked about it in the beginning, you can just ask people to reprise that for a moment. And that tends to re-energize things, among other pieces. But go ahead.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, if one person is dominating the conversation, that's really you can use your tools. Again, that's a facilitation piece. It's just like if you want to talk about another topic, you can ask people, like, we really want to be sure to share the air. Like, we want to make room for, like, you can even say, hey, Erica, you are making a great point. If you'd like to share some more, you can put it in the chat. We can figure out a way to talk about that once we finish this piece of the conversation. I want to open up the floor, open up the space to other people who might have something else to contribute also. So it's not, in the virtual space, like, it doesn't feel as much, well, to me personally, it doesn't feel as much like as calling out. If you feel like it's a calling out and not a calling in to try to, like, get somebody to share the air, the private part of the chat is also super useful, because you can send a message to that person directly without everyone else seeing it, and you can keep your smile on the screen, and then your chat can very much be like, hi, just gonna ask you if you could share the air and let some other people talk before you share the next thing that you want to say. Like, no harm, no foul. You haven't called them out. You don't feel like they're standing there like, oh no, with the spotlight on them, if you're not comfortable asking in a way that can happen during the call. How you handle disagreements or conflicting perspectives. There might be disagreements, there might be conflicting perspectives. You don't know exactly, unless it's invitation only and it's closed, you don't know who's going to show up on that screen. People might have, but here's the thing, what I've learned for sure. There have been some instances where people got upset during a conversation, but even in person, I've never had that experience where people are like, I'm going to just be disagreeable to be disagreeable. I'm going to cause conflict just to cause conflict. People tend to self-select for common ground conversations, and if people are showing up to common ground conversations, it's because they are looking to have a conversation. They're looking to connect with other people, even if they totally disagree, even if they have never had that experience. They are willing to still talk about it and talk it out. This is another point where you go back to your agreements. You have the civility rules for a reason. People have agreed to participate in this way. I'm going to ask you to think back to the civility rules, or I'm going to bring up the civility rules again. Again, this is a place where the private chat works really well also. You can say, perhaps this isn't the space for that conversation. That's something that you can continue at another time. We want to continue this conversation. If it gets to be that point, you can also tell your guests in the very beginning, and this is an absolute last resort, but it's okay to use it. You have the power of the mute button. And it's just like when people are afraid of Zoom bombing or whatever else happens out here in the world, you do have the power of the mute button. And it seems terrible and rude, but we are in a whole different world, different spaces, and you don't know if people who normally wouldn't behave a certain way, we've all been online, we've all been on social media at some point, people who would never behave a certain way in person, things happen. in virtual spaces where I might not have gotten that upset before. I might not have said those words because I might have wanted to just continue a conversation, but that might change in a virtual space. And you can't anticipate everything that's going to happen, but you can be prepared for things that happen. And that's okay. And it's okay to ask people if they can hold off on something, take it offline, or you can offer them space at the end of the conversation, like if they want to continue to talk it out. What if someone says something offensive?
Pardon me, Eric.
Go ahead.
Just briefly at that. Remember, this is where the power of the pause can really come in handy as well. I think in mainstream culture here in North America, we're afraid to just stop or pause the conversation. But that's a very powerful tool that many other cultures know, and many cultures that aren't dominant in North America also know. Right? Inviting people to take 30 seconds to regroup, and to invite them to personally, like weaving with what Erica said, all right, I'm going to repost the civility rules during these 30 seconds. I invite you to simply notice which one is recalling you to observe at this moment. So you're calling people in collectively, even with that moment, not calling people out. Right? And then trusting going back into that. I've never seen that fail. You know?
We're gonna knock on wood still about that. And so you can't anticipate, you might be able to anticipate the ramp up, but someone saying something offensive could absolutely happen. Again, we can't anticipate it, but we can be prepared for it. This could be one of those things where if you're being very civil has not worked, you can just mute people. This can be an opportunity where you can invite people to leave your conversation. It's an invitation to leave my conversation because that's not the conversation that we're having. You are still the host. This is still your conversation. Your facilitators are there to guide the people who want to participate through these rounds of conversation, through this period of reflection, to think about what they want to do next, or to think about if there's anything that they want to do next, or just to make other connections with other people. If there are people if there's someone who shows up who is not on that same path, then this isn't the conversation for them. And that's okay. Like, I think we got to take away this idea that you can't, that's why I said earlier, question kindly and being kind. Kind is a whole different thing. Being nice lets other people run over your conversation and be offensive and continue that. Being kind means that you recognize that there are other people in the conversation, and it's okay for you to facilitate them being able to participate fully when someone else can't. Noelle?
Can we spend a minute on this one? Only because particularly in this environment, I think what is offensive is very different to different people. And if you have a very diverse audience, someone may say something that they think is perfectly reasonable and it may really harm someone else. And it's not that either has actually done anything wrong. They've just never actually met in that space. So, and I'm not saying that every facilitator can handle that. So I guess part of it is, what can we expect in some of these conversations, or some things that people have learned in these confrontations that leave both people feeling empowered, not disempowered. And I don't know the answer, so I'm actually asking to spend a little time with people I admire, thinking about this and sharing it with people. And I know it takes us a little longer, but I'm sorry, I think it's very important.
No, it totally is very important. And it's like this idea that we're in these spaces and people come out of other boxes now. Go ahead, Lila.
Well, I'll add here, just as someone who's been a participant in I feel like well-facilitated spaces, that going back to what Tony said, that moment where the facilitator says, let's take that 30-second breathing break, it's also really helpful for me as an introvert, because I probably am not in the disagreement, but I'm feeling the tension. So it helps me to come back, and I'm sure it helps the other folks who are in the disagreement to come back. I really think that that is a really powerful way. I've been in spaces, and I don't know if it's Erica or Tony or other spaces where people have asked us to do some breathing. Let's take 4 deep breaths. That again really helps to slow it down. I appreciate those techniques.
I think a super useful tool in these spaces also is the ability to not just break. When you think about when you're in person, you have the opportunity to get up, go do something else. People are grabbing more food, but also in the virtual spaces, like it's almost like even when you know that you're at home, you can leave the screen at any time. You can turn it off. You can do something else, but people don't. So I think it's also very important as a host and as facilitators to, there's only one way to say it, to give permission for people to do what they need to do for themselves. Mm-hmm. People tend to get more tense. People tend to get more like the longer they've been sitting in the Zoom call and I want to say this thing and now you've said something, and now I'm saying something. But if you have an opportunity, like, okay, we're going to take even you can do a 30-second pause. You can do whatever it is that you need to do. We're going to go off screen for a minute. We're going to play some music in the middle before we get into the next round of conversation. I would love to see people also, just like me personally, because I love to do this part, and I've had to do it in only one time in a training, is invite someone to go into another space with you. In these virtual spaces, like that would be where you would walk off with somebody in person, where you're just like, let's walk and talk about this. This would also be an opportunity to say, can we go off into the other space? Because a lot of times when people are being like not behaving well, they really just want to be heard. Like, we're still people, we're really big kids who have some bills to pay. And some of the worst things that come out of people's mouths, it's like, I need attention right now. I need somebody to acknowledge that I said this. I need to be heard right now. And it's okay to pull them off into a separate space, because you don't want the Lilas in your conversation to be like, okay, I'm out because I'm done. Like, this caused me too much tension and I'm going to leave the meeting. And not saying that I haven't done that before too, just like, oh, this is too much, gotta go. So just be aware of that. That's one of those things that may come up. Feel free to continue the conversation with us. If you have other tips and tricks that you'd like to share with facilitators and hosts, if you've run into this before in your in-person conversations or in other online spaces that you've been in, feel free to share those so that we can share them out to the rest of the group and so that we have them. Part of being a facilitator is constantly learning facilitation tips.
I'm going to circle back to some of the things we said very much at the beginning that very much apply here now. This practice of turning to wonder when there is offense that's been offered, right? First of all, as the facilitator, to notice not only spirit of wonder, like, I wonder what's going on with that person that they are showing up like this now, right? And I mean wonder in the sense of awe, not wonder in the sense of judgment. Like, I wonder, like, no, like something's happening here, right? And like Erica said, if needed, you can, with Zoom, you have the power to go into a separate breakout room with them, right? So there's that piece. Going further, there's also the wonder, I wonder what's going on in me that I'm reacting or being tempted to react to what has been offered that I'm experiencing as offensive, right? What's going on in me?
Well, and that's part of what I wanted to make sure we address, is that it's not always an outright offensive, aggressive move.
Exactly.
It's a learning opportunity for people of privilege to recognize when their language or their assumptions could be offending someone else in a conversation. And my tact has usually been to turn to the person offended and use my favorite, I do listen to understand, but I use it differently than you, Erica. For me, it's reminding people we're not here, we're here to understand each other better. So the three words that meant, tell me more. Like, oh, tell me more.
Exactly.
And just in that moment, I think that person is given permission to express and for the other person to learn what was offensive about what they said, instead of just, you've been offensive, let's go talk, or I've been offended, what's wrong with me, what's triggered by me. So I don't know if that works in this virtual space.
Yes,
absolutely.
One of the things I would.
Yes, and going further, if I'm the one who has said something that appears to have triggered or offended, right? Instead of, a great phrase and intention with it is like, what just happened? What did I just do? So engaging others who, it seems, you wonder, perhaps have been offended, there is this learning opportunity, as Noelle has just pointed out. And instead of retreating into oh, I shouldn't be uncomfortable. You made me uncomfortable. Like, no, what just happened? What just happened here? Can we talk about what just happened? I want to learn from this. Right? So there are these different aspects of it. And once again, the civility rules, like I said before, just taking. So this is a real, if something offensive has happened in a way that is really obviously offensive, I think the basic ground rules, so to speak, need to be revisited, because you need to rebuild the sense of trust, that this is enough trust, that this is a place where people can hold tension creatively. So if things have been so offensive that the tension has been too much, right, has not been able to hold, you as a facilitator, it's up to you. People are going to be looking for you to do it, to sort of reset the container, so to speak, to reform the circle virtually. And we've mentioned lots of ways so far for how to do that. But that's really on you as the facilitator to check out, again, what just happened? Has this been something that's broken a sense of people's sense of connection here? And what can we do with that? And the last piece, physicality is really important that we forget, I think, in these virtual spaces. For example, we've just been on this for, I don't know, almost an hour. I can't really sit still for an hour. I mean, some of it is just taking that moment, going further with what Erica said, like, all right, let's just all stand for a moment and shake it out, you know, or like we just stand up and down, you know, like these sorts, the resetting of the container, both proactively, you know, every 15, 20 minutes, making sure that you invite some regrounding physically, right? Let alone when this tension is happening, people are going to be holding it. They're going to be constricting in their body somewhere and doing some things to re-invite that opening back up from within. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Does anyone else want to contribute to that part? Thank you. Moving into the final pieces of your conversation, so feel free to ask any questions about any other things that have to do with facilitation or hosting, but also moving into the rest of it, at some point you're going to need to end this conversation, and at some point you need to capture what's happened in your conversation. So in these spaces, like, you have the opportunity to record what happened in your conversation. So just, you know, as a great tip, etiquette tip, let your participants know that that's an option, that you're going to be recording the conversation. If anyone doesn't want to participate in being recorded, there are probably ways, which we'll get into in the technical tips training, to be able to exclude some people from it if they don't want to participate in that. But know that you can record the conversation, know that you can save your chat. If you're more comfortable, depending on how you do things, if you're more comfortable with, you know, pen and paper off screen, feel free to do that. But capture what happened in your conversation, especially when people come back with their reflections before you end your conversation, to be able to capture what it is that people got out of it. Because that goes back to what Noelle said earlier, when you and your facilitator, when hosts and facilitators have talked about and agreed on, like, what direction they want to go in, what's the intention, what's the purpose behind this conversation, and what do I want to get out of it, you want to make sure that you capture that you did actually get that out of it. If something else came up during that conversation where other people were participating in this conversation, you're like, oh, wow, not only did I get this thing that I wanted to get out of the conversation, but here's a whole new thing that I didn't think of before because these people participated. And so you're able to also capture that you learned something new, that you figured out you were interested in something more in that conversation, and that you can move forward with something else from that conversation. So remember how important it is not only to have the conversation, but to reflect on the conversation, capture what gets shared from the conversation. And then the final thing is checking out of the conversation. So just like you checked in, you check out. And wait, so I'm gonna ask Tony to say what he says, because I like the boat one.
The boat? You mean the boat piece? All right.
Yes.
So if anybody has spent any time around water, in any size craft on water, from, like, you know, the most flimsy rowboat to an ocean liner, right? The most predictably powerful and dangerous times on the water, predictably, are getting away from the dock and coming back to the dock. And so knowing that, just proactively plan for that, doing things in a way, like, that's why you have a planned check-in and a planned checkout. You know You're going to be bringing it back to the dock in a way that no limbs are going to get crushed, metaphorically speaking, can happen, in a boat. But otherwise, we've all seen those things where there's that parking lot conversation afterwards. That's
Yes.
a sign, right, that the checkout wasn't really brought back to the dock necessarily, depending on, it's not 100% true, but it could be an indication. And put the other way, a well done checkout actually has the power to set what people will be talking about after the meeting, right? What meaning that meeting has already begun to create together collectively in the checkout will ripple forward one way or the other. So taking that opportunity to really do that. Is that what you're intending?
Absolutely.
Right.
Thank you.
So now how do we do that?
So how we do that? So this is one of those things. So you've already asked questions during the reflection time to figure out what was important to people and what stuck with them. When people are actually checking out of their conversation, this is an opportunity to ask people, what are they leaving with? This is an opportunity to ask people, you can ask like big questions, like what are they leaving with? Or what did they learn today? Or you can ask the questions you can ask that personal level question, just like you did in the rounds of conversation, that community level question, that systems level question. So, what are you sitting with as you leave? What is the hope that you have for our community as you leave? And what's the thing that you can see changing as a result of having this conversation? So there might be different levels to your checkout, or depending on your time frame, depending on your conversation, like the spirit of your conversation, what happened in it, you know how to read your room. So it might be an opportunity to just be like, you know what? We've had a great conversation. We talked about a reflection, and like sometimes the reflection ends up being like almost a pre-checkout for some people because they've done the work and they put it all there on the paper or in the chat box, or they've said it all that they need to say. And then you can just do a one-word checkout. So you can ask people, they can leave with a word, a phrase, an image. It can just be one thing, like, what are you leaving today? And then once again, use your tools. If you're using a virtual platform, you can ask people to check out in the chat and also put their voice into the room. So it just depends on, like, if you are looking at your time and you're like, oh, we gotta go, then that's an opportunity to still end the conversation in a responsible way, but also be respectful of people's time. So you wanna be clear that you're doing that. And so that's an opportunity to just check out with people. Did anyone want to add anything else to check out?
Should we do one?
Check out even faster by doing a word that
Yes.
everyone says their word at the same time, and it kind of creates this explosion of it. I mean, I know it sounds like you're cheating, but it actually does create this kind of beautiful moment of everyone expressing kind of what they feel.
Yep, while typing it into the chat.
And it's on their faces.
Yep, and typing it into the chat so it can be.
Right. So you can still capture it.
Speaking of checkout.
Totally do one. Take yourselves off mute.
Great.
Go ahead, Tony.
And one last piece with that is, this you'll come back to this probably in the technical thing, but most people don't realize they can save the chat. So that's something people can take with them as well. They can take the chat. We won't tell them how to do it right here. That'll be in the technical modes. But if people that's a really powerful way of like closing down the conversation, is that people know that they can take that chat thing with them. All right, back to y'all.
All right, so are we all off mute? We're gonna try this checkout, one word, all at the same time. We're going to model this behavior. All right, your one word checkout. All right, 1, 2, 3.
Unfolding.
It work?
It totally works. It'll be on the recording.
Maybe people laughed and feel joy, so
Exactly. Yeah, that's one last piece. That we didn't cover this time, right? As Maya Angelou would say, long after people have been with you, right? The first thing they'll forget is maybe like the specifics of what you said, right? The last thing they'll forget is how they felt being together. Right? So keeping that in mind, like we just did.
And we're all smiling when we leave. So hopefully now that you're ending the webinar, you'll be smiling too. Like you're like, this is a lot of information, but I'm happy about it. So Stephanie, whatever you would like to close us out with, any final thoughts that you'd like to leave our hosts and facilitators with?
I think just thank you. This is amazing as usual. I'm so grateful that we have this in this format, because I think the beauty of this is it's so much information. We've done this for 3 years, and every time we do it, I leave and just feeling like I've learned so much. And I'm grateful that we can take this video and now go back and go through and reabsorb different really important elements of this. So just thank you to all of you for your time today and your expertise. Thank you to those of you who are watching this for taking on this challenge and wanting to bring people together. It's hard work, and but it's so rewarding, and it's really exciting, and I can't wait to see what you build. So thank you all.
Yes.
Stay tuned for training number 2. That will be about how to take action and how to get funding for projects, and training number 3, which will be how does this thing work? What do I do when it's not clicking the clicky? and we will see you all soon. So thank you so much.
Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.